This is the Steam Deck. It's Valve's answer to PC gaming on the go, and quite frankly, it's changed the way I game. So what is it about the Steam Deck that I love so much, and is it right for you? Well, that's what we hope to answer in today's video, as we go ahead and take a deep dive into the Steam Deck and talk about everything I love, and a few things that I think could be improved. Hello everybody, my name is Robert, and this is Clue. Firstly, let's talk about pricing, because I don't know how Valve are doing it. The baseline 64GB model starts at just £349, but if you're going to be buying a Steam Deck, I would recommend the £449 256GB model, because it's going to fill up fast, especially with all the Proton compatibility layers. This pricing is so competitive compared to the other devices, such as the Iron Neo, that are already on the market. And in terms of price to performance, there really is nothing like it. Valve is clearly subsidising this to get as much amazing performance at such low prices. Sure, you can get more capable handhelds that will probably have better specs and run games significantly better than the Steam Deck would, but you'd be paying 2, 3, maybe even 4 times the price for the privilege, and to me, it just doesn't seem like a worthwhile investment. This feels like a sweet spot in terms of price and performance with the Steam Deck. When you first get the Steam Deck out of the packaging, you'll notice its sheer size. It's not a small handheld by any means. For reference, the Switch Lite can actually fit inside of the screen. With this much bigger size, you'd also expect a much higher weight. It comes in around 669 grams, which is comfortable, particularly when playing lying down. It doesn't really feel like your arms are fatiguing too much, and it's not too heavy to carry around either. But with its size, you will need a large backpack, or be happy to carry it in its included carry case. This is the most comfortable handheld I've ever owned. It feels so ergonomic in the hand. You can tell that Valve really did pay attention to the smaller details, and their previous attempts with the Steam controller and their knowledge that they learnt there really has carried across to create one of the most comfortable handhelds I've ever played. Whenever I'm using something like a PlayStation or an Xbox controller, after a short while I feel my hands beginning to cramp around here, and I just don't get that with the Steam Deck. Something about its ergonomics feels amazing. I never felt like I had to really reach to hit any of those buttons, but those paddles on the back I did find were quite easy to hit accidentally during gameplay, and if mapped to a certain control, this can really take you out of the game. Sticking with these controls, you have everything you need to play an enormous range of titles, from first-person shooters all the way to management sims, such as Planet Coaster, thanks to those 2 large touchpads on each side of the screen. The touch and haptic force feedback of these actually feels very similar to that of the iPhone 7 and beyond's Touch ID sensors. The pads act as your mouse in-game that require it, but they can also be used to map to the right-hand stick, making first-person shooters feel even more accurate. The sticks again do feel great, though the lack of Hall effect sensors does mean that stick drift will become a problem in the future. Aside of that, they feel great and accurate, as does every other button on this device. But of course, this is completely user customizable and upgradable. Valve have made it so easy to be able to change out components really quickly, so you can actually buy Hall effect sensors down the line if you feel like you need them, and they're super easy to install too. Front and centre, we have that massive 7-inch touchscreen as well. It may not be the highest resolution, coming in at 1280 by 800 pixels, and it won't be the most colour accurate either, thanks to that IPS panel. But quite honestly, in every game I played, I didn't really notice it, and that lower resolution does mean that some of the more taxing AAA titles do tend to run that little bit better, because they aren't pushing a much higher screen resolution. With a 400 nit peak brightness, I found I was able to view the screen in almost every weather condition, even in direct sunlight. But if you haven't gone for that 512GB model, then it can get a bit glary at times without their etched glass display. Along the bottom of the device, we simply have room for that micro SD card slot. This is super important because the built-in storage, even on the 256GB model, will fill up incredibly quickly. So of course, the loading times and the speeds won't quite be the same as that internal SSD, but quite honestly, in most use cases, you probably won't see a difference. So stick a 1TB micro SD card in there, and I think you're pretty much sorted. On the top of the device, we're seeing the volume controls, as well as the power and the USB-C port. This is for charging, and I like its placement here. However, I do worry a little bit that it's going to be putting quite a lot of strain on that port at the top, so longevity could well be an issue here, but we'll just have to see. SteamOS is perhaps one of the most impressive bits about the Steam Deck. Valve's continued support and development of the Proton compatibility layers have meant that gaming on Linux has never felt this good, especially compared to playing on Windows. Straight away though, it is worth noting that some games that use rootkit style anti-cheats simply won't work here. If you do want to play those games, you can install Windows in a dual boot scenario. However, support is still pretty patchy here. When you're loading up SteamOS for the first time, you'll be greeted with a familiar big picture style mode that's been in development for years and left over from Steam machines of late, but it's incredibly well optimized for the deck's form factor. In the store and library, you have a great on deck section, meaning it's easy to find games that will just work, and have been tested by Valve. But I did find this was a little bit misleading, because a lot of the games that said unsupported or hadn't been tested on the platform worked absolutely fine out of the box. Sure, some of them did need a new Proton GE layer to be able to install and played, but quite honestly, I found it was very misleading and almost all of the games that I played just worked. There is a ton of customization options here as well inside of the OS, allowing you to change almost everything about the device to get the best battery life for you, even as going as far as changing the refresh rate of the screen and FPS to match. This is the kind of detail that PC players will absolutely love, but it could also be a little overwhelming for console players moving to the deck platform. There is even a full desktop mode here, so in theory you could carry this around and use this as an office device as well as a gaming machine. Valve's Linux-based OS is simple to navigate and will feel familiar to anyone who's used a Windows or Mac platform before. The main reason I found myself using the desktop mode though was to install third-party apps and to get all the games working, so naturally anything using the EA or Ubisoft software will require some tinkering in this desktop mode. I played a wide range of games on deck, from story-driven games such as Quantum Break, all the way to racing with Burnout Paradise and some first-person shooting with Apex Legends. And I'm happy to report that almost every game I tried worked impeccably on deck. Sure, the controls and form factor do lend themselves to certain genres of games over others. For example, a first-person shooter and adventure game will run really well here, while some of the more RPG style games you may struggle with a little more, just because of that lower resolution screen and the sheer amount of text. The games that I found hardest to control though were the management sim styles, such as Planet Coaster and even Command & Conquer, due to the limited accuracy of those touchpads. Every game I played did run at a smooth 60 or 40 FPS depending on what I had my screen resolution and refresh rate set to at the time. I never found a game that would struggle on anything but high settings. The Witcher 3 couldn't be maxed out, and I suspect a lot of the newer AAA titles may need bumping down to medium or even low settings, but this really isn't that much of an issue, especially on that lower resolution screen. So what is it that I love about the Steam Deck so much? Well, it's its convenience. You see, I've had a Steam library of 300 odd games for years, and it's always felt very antisocial playing them, because I've got to sit in here with my gaming PC while my partner sits in the other room doing her own thing. And that's where the deck really does come in handy, because it allows me to take those games and experiences wherever I want to go. I can be sat on the sofa next to her and be in the same space. I could be in bed, I could be on the loo, I could be on the train, and I could even be waiting for a musical to start. Yes, that's actually something I did, and it worked really well in that scenario. So that is all of the great things about deck, but of course there are some caveats too, because no device is perfect. One of the biggest ones that everyone will bring up is the battery life. And yes, that is the case. In order to get this device so small and light, Valve did have to cut some corners, and it is noticeable. In games such as The Witcher 3, on high settings, I was able to get about 80 minutes of gameplay before the device actually died. Of course, there are optimizations you can make to get the battery life to last that little bit longer, but on some of the less taxing games, I was finding I could get between 6 and 8 hours of gameplay, and that seems much more acceptable in my book. Of course, you can also make the battery life last a lot longer with something like a battery pack, or even use this device plugged in. But for some people, that rather limited battery life might just be too much of a bitter pill to swallow. Secondly, this device gets pretty hot too. It is a gaming PC at the end of the day, and though it has adequate cooling, it can get pretty hot and pretty noisy. When that fan ramps up, it is loud and almost drowns out those actually pretty incredible front-facing speakers. Of course, being a gaming PC though, you can start to play with those fan curves to get them exactly how you want them. It's not recommended, and if you run your fans too low, you can risk damaging the device, but if it's something that you want to do, then you can go ahead and do it. I think perhaps the biggest issue though, is that this device does require some tinkering. As I've mentioned, most of the games that I played worked well straight away without me having to do any work, but some games will require that additional work, going into the OS, changing files, downloading additional software, and for some people that's just too much work. They don't want to have to do all of this. If you're coming from a PC gaming platform anyway, then you're probably used to doing this, but being a console gamer or coming into the PC space brand new, this just might feel like too much work and you just get lost and don't know what you're doing. So if you feel like that's going to be too much work for you, then this device simply isn't made for you. So there we have it, guys. That's been my thoughts and first impressions and real review of the Steam Deck. I really am just scratching the surface of what this device can do, and if you want to see a ton more Steam Deck content, why don't you let me know in the comment section down below, and of course while you're down there as well, why don't you get subscribed, share this with your friends and family, because that means that this was a good video and more people should really be seeing it. Anyway guys, my name's been Robert, this has been Clue, and I will catch you in the next one. Adios.